Oh, well, now we're live. Hello,
Yeah.
hello. Thank you for joining us, folks. My name is Mel Cassidy. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, a relationship coach, and a published author. And I am here with my wonderful colleague, Megan Vaudry. Did I say that right? I probably messed that up again, didn't I?
No, I will. It's okay. I will use the correct pronunciation. Hello, my name is Megan Vaudry, and I am also a relationship coach based here in Vancouver on Coast Salish territory. And Mel, my fabulous colleague, and Mel and I co-facilitate the Vancouver Polyamory 101 in-person discussion groups. And we are here today to do a recap on our most recent discussion group. Mel, do you want to talk about the topic?
Yeah, so it's Pride Month, June. And so our topic was queering relationships. And we kind of flip back and forth between who chooses the topic right now. And so this was my choice. And I think it's an interesting one for me because it's somewhere where I find I flip flop back and forth because people have this question of like, is polyamory queer? And I used to think like, oh, like, is polyamory an orientation or is it a choice? And I have at different times had different answers to that. So I thought it would be fun to bring that to the group. And yet that isn't exactly what we ended up discussing, which was really cool. And I know that you had some thoughts, Megan, after the discussion that you were like, oh, I wish I'd shared this. So I don't know if you want to kick us off with some of that.
Sure, sure. So I'll kick us off just by touching on my perspective on the topic itself. And what I heard in the discussion group that mirrors some of my own perspective on this topic is thinking about relationships beyond the norm
Mhm.
is queering relationships. So
Yeah.
when we think of queerness as a rejection of the status quo, and we think of queerness as a rejection of the cultural scripts about relationships that we've been handed, polyamory and other forms of non-monogamy can both queer those relationships, can queer relationships, and can uphold the status quo and not queer relationships,
Yeah.
depending on the perspective of those involved, depending on a lot of different factors about the relationship itself, the relationships themselves. And yeah, I mean, it comes back to relationships are made up of the individuals inside them. And so
Mhm.
it always comes back to, I think, the values of the individuals. And since, Mel and I are both queer, I think we both, Mel, I would like to hear you speak to this, but we both, I'll just speak for myself. I really, really love to look at relationships and look at opening relationships and exploring relationships beyond monogamy as a
Mhm.
way to question the scripts, the cultural scripts that we've been handed, and a way to redesign them in a way that makes sense for us, our
Mhm.
values, and how we show up in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about the alignment of cisness. There's an alignment of cisness, heteronormativity, and mononormativity, right? They kind of all go
Mm-hmm.
together. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're pushing back against one, you do question the others, whether that, whether you choose monogamy consciously or, um, you're like, that's not for me. I think just the questioning of it, there's something in that. And somebody said something during the discussion, which I wrote down because I thought it was such a beautiful way to um, put this together. It was along the lines of the moment you have to defend who you are, it becomes political. And I thought that
Mm-hmm.
is such an interesting framework because, we
Mm-hmm.
have that lovely definition that we get from bell hooks about queerness being at odds with the dominant culture. And I think
Yeah.
in that regards, polyamory is definitely queer in
Mm-hmm.
its foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But to then take it a step further and go, how are we having to defend ourselves politically?
Mm-hmm.
And, there is an interesting tension where, you could be polyamorous and not be out about it and not
Mm-hmm.
be visibly polyamorous to the rest of the world. The rest of the
Mm-hmm.
world might see you as if you are a cis het monogamous person, even
Mm-hmm.
if you are, non-binary and queer and polyamorous. And so there's an interesting nuance in there. And for me, it just brings up more questions, because I find, after this discussion, I was like, wow, like, is there almost like two flavors of queerness? Is there an
Mm-hmm.
internal queerness that's more to do with like your own personal experience? And is there an external queerness of how you show up and exist in the world?
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. I mean, I think so. I think the answer to that question is yes.
Great.
Yeah. And there's so many factors that go into outness. We have talked before in our discussion group about outness in polyamory, and how even for folks who are comfortable about being out about being in like a homosexual, a queer relationship, being out about polyamory can be a whole other level of exposure to stigmatization. And so I think the reasons that people mask and the reasons that people aren't out are nuanced and varied. And so, yeah, I love that you differentiate, that you offered this, the internal queerness, the internal capacity to question relational norms, and how that
Mm,
radiates out into your personal life and in your personal sphere, and the difference between that and, like living loud and proud, and,
yeah.
being in a position where you can give other folks permission to be out with your outness.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked
Yeah.
about that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just, the thing that this is, I heard some, like, one of the things that stuck out to me in the group was just this like beautiful little thing of ever expanding weirdness. And when you talk about the internal queerness and the external queerness, I think about these different degrees of ways that we can um, radiate our ever expanding weirdness. And I'm using weird in like a very affectionate way. Um, yeah, so that I think that this can feel so good inside, to it can be such a
Mhm.
process of self-discovery and self-actualization, to uncover our own internal queerness,
Yeah.
and then an additional journey of self-actualization and personal development to be able to externalize that in whatever ways we can.
It was really interesting hearing people talk about how, especially people who maybe had never questioned anything before, that
Mm.
the journey of polyamory introduced them to questioning more aspects about themselves, especially
Hmm.
from the cis men in the room, for
Yeah.
questioning like, oh, like, how much am I upholding something that isn't actually true to me because this is the script I was handed. and
Yeah.
and that was really interesting to just hear that, that is a thing that happens. And I don't know that that's a universal experience, but
Mm.
certainly amongst people who showed up for this discussion, there was
Hmm.
some flavor of polyamory was a doorway into
Hmm.
discovering more of that full weirdness and embracing that within themselves.
Yeah, and I would say that the opposite can be true as well. And because queerness can actually be a way to polyamory as well. We see
Yes.
this a lot in folks who are in a heterosexual relationship and then discover a queerness within themselves, and so want to use polyamory as a container to explore that.
Yeah.
And so it goes both ways. Polyamory informs queerness, and queerness can inform polyamory.
Yeah.
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 There was another thing that somebody had brought up, was that there's also a question of what does straightness mean in this regard,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting to try and define like what is straight. Because especially like within polyamory, because I think that there are, not all polyamorous relationships are queer. Some polyamorous relationships appear to be very straight. And so it does bring up this question of like, well, what is straightness? How are we defining that? And is it just because that's the default? And yeah, I mean, again, this is a discussion that I came away with way more questions than I had answers.
Yeah, yeah, and since we're in Pride Month, this intersects with the conversation of queer spaces
Yeah.
and how important it is to have queer spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and how important it is to honor the experience of people who have lived as queer people throughout their life, and how
Yeah.
different that experience is from someone who is, exploring queerness without it being like a main feature of their identity.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
And
and
it's
someone who's,
especially.
I was going to say, someone
Oh,
who's in a straight passing relationship and
yeah.
exploring their queerness from there has almost like a kind of blanket around them that holds them back from the some of the stigma and some of the challenges that someone
Hmm.
exploring their queerness from a single place might do. And that's not to say that there aren't unique challenges in that experience,
Yeah.
but it's definitely a different experience of queer.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we think of the stigmatized experience of queerness, and I'm really glad that you brought this up because that is very different from like a sheltered experience of queerness.
Mhm.
I would call it what you're speaking about, someone exploring their queerness from a place of having a heterosexual relationship to protect them from that stigma. And then at the same time, people in that position also really struggle to be seen as queer at all. So there's that issue of bi invisibility that gets especially like that gets that gets even more pronounced when the person who is bi is in a straight presenting relationship. So yeah, like I said, relationships are made up of the individuals inside them, and we all have such unique experiences. But I think in terms of Pride Month, it's a really good thing to be aware of, both for folks who are in this position of being in a straight presenting relationship, entering queer spaces, and having a recognition of the fact that they don't, that their identity different experience for them in culture, and to be conscious of the stigmatization that comes with having queerness as a central feature of your identity. But then also for folks who are queer, to recognize that folks who are in straight presenting relationships are also having an experience of queerness. I think that, both sides need to be understanding in order to create harmony in communities.
There's an overlap with the biphobia, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
mean, someone who identifies as bi, this is something I've encountered, and I think there's alongside that within the queer and LGBTQ plus world, there's also sometimes a bit of stigma around non-monogamy.
Yeah.
When you look at how much the gay community has looked to marriage as a marker of
Mhm.
legitimacy, right? And
Mhm.
and it is that,
Mhm.
legally there
Mhm.
are so many more protections for same-sex couples now than there used to be, and that
Mhm.
is tied to the capacity for gay marriage. And we're speaking
Mhm.
specifically here in Canada. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, I remember in my early dating days when I was just kind of, I'll just date everybody and see what happens. Going on a date with another woman who was absolutely horrified that I was
Mm.
polyamorous, who felt like polyamory was an affront to queerness, which
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
interesting because for me, my polyamory was a way for me to actually honor my queerness and
Mhm.
honor my
Mhm.
attraction to multiple genders.
Mhm.
And so it is interesting, and like we used to have a polyamory community float in the Vancouver Pride Parade years ago.
Yeah.
And and there would always be a discussion that would come up about like, well, what capacity are we there in? Are we there because we're saying that polyamory is queer? Are we in the Pride Parade because we're saying we're allies? Are we there because there's such a big overlap? And there were some people who were not happy about the
Mm.
polyamory float being in the Pride Parade.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because it
Mhm.
felt like it took away from the queer pride, from the journey of queer rights.
Mhm.
and and yet, even though polyamory is under that umbrella of decriminalized within Canada, we
Mhm.
don't have the same kind of rights with being able to recognize multiple partners.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole interesting political aspect to this conversation. And I mean, as someone like I feel like I don't really support necessarily the institution of marriage in any form. I would much
Mm.
rather have like intentional kinship,
Mhm.
that we can make contracts with as many people as we want to be our
Mhm.
chosen family. But yeah, it definitely it is such a complex field to kind of wade into.
It is. It is a very complex field to wade into. And non-monogamy and polyamory both are very diverse in the ways that they're practiced.
Yeah.
So we do have folks, so under the same name of polyamory, we have folks who are creating kinship networks, like you're talking
Hmm.
about, who are radically rewriting how they live out their relationships, their intimate relationships. And then under the same umbrella, we have folks are who present in society as a heterosexual couple.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and there's this discussion about how much people who have privilege have a responsibility to deconstruct these societal norms,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
and that brings us kind of nicely into that topic of how do we queer our relationships? You know,
Hmm.
what are ways in which we can be more queer? I mean, my and this kind of goes back into that internal queerness and external queerness, I think.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
my own personal journey, I've gotten so fed up of being read as cis and het that I've been
Hmm.
thinking consciously, how can I present and show up in the world in a way that feels more queer, but also a way that
Hmm.
feels authentic to
Hmm.
me? Because
Hmm.
I am not someone who's like, oh, I should do this because that's what queer people do. Because
Hmm.
I'm that radical who's like, why? I just want to be me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think in a similar vein, there's something around how do we make sure that the ways that we're relating, or how do we explore within the ways that we're relating? Maybe that's a
Hmm.
better way to put it. How do we explore in the ways that we're relating, challenging the norms that come to us from heterosexuality, that come to us from cisgenderism, that come to
Hmm.
us from mononormativity? How
Hmm.
are we actively challenging them and pushing back against them?
Hmm. One of the ways that I do this in my personal life, because I live in a cis het presenting relationship as a bisexual polyamorous woman. And interestingly enough, my partner and I founded our relationship on the concept of polyamory as
Mm,
opposed to entering into a monogamous relationship and then opening it later. So we are constantly having these discussions about how can we queer our
mm,
relationship. And so, I'm just going to throw out like a practical way is we don't subscribe to the script of when you invite one of us to a social event, you invite both of us. So I'm constantly saying in group chats, like, well, I can't speak for Mo, but this is my plan. And so, I think these little things, like these micro acts of
mhm.
queering your relationships, right? And I think also in when I'm showing up in dating, thinking about what assumptions are being made and trying to get out ahead of them. thinking
Yeah.
about what assumptions are both being made about me, and then also understanding the assumptions that are made about that I'm making about the other relationships that I'm interacting with, and seeing what kind of questions I can ask and how I can get deeper and understand what the values behind those behind the decisions are in order to subvert those assumptions.
I love that.
So that's, yeah, just
Yeah.
to get, yeah, so just on like on a practical level, that's how, just to give some examples of how that can be lived out. Yeah, how about you? What do you think in terms of either
Yeah.
kind of big picture like philosophy or nitty gritty? I'm interested in both levels.
I relate to what you say about like really emphasizing your autonomy as individuals.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
for me as a solo polyamorous person, that's huge. I'm always
Hmm.
pushing back against anyone who tries to project escalator expectations on me. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
telling, a friend's partner once, like, oh, I'm going to be traveling to visit a partner down in the States. And she was like, oh, that's a big step. And like there was this immediate expectation of escalator on there. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like, what are you talking about? That's not what I do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like my best friend got married last weekend, and I loved that she did not just automatically give plus ones to everybody. I love that she really thought
Ah.
about it in terms of who do I know, who do I care about, and who do I
Mm-hmm.
want to invite. And that was really
Mm-hmm.
lovely to kind of be in this space and to celebrate my best friend's marriage, which like I am very, very stoked for. And also it not be a totally couple centric space was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so cool. So, so cool.
Yeah, especially at a
Um,
wedding.
I know. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. It was really
Mhm.
wonderful. I remember chatting with somebody who like I was like, "Oh yeah, there's a little bit of interest here, but I don't care. I'm not here for that. I'm not here to couple up."
Mm. Mhm, 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 mhm.
Um, but I think in my relationships, other ways that I find pushing back against the norms, there's also like in terms of for me, it's just making sure that my gender experience is honored. I am non-binary. I am gender fluid, and that means that my experience of gender can shift. It's like changing gears. And it's an interesting thing for me to notice that, there are some partners where I consistently feel in one shape of gender. And then there are some
Mhm,
partners where I notice my experience of gender shifts with them.
mhm,
And just kind of encouraging them to go with that and seeing what
mhm,
it's like in our relationship to hold space for that is
mhm.
really, really interesting. For me, that helps the relationship be a queer space. Um, and and another piece for me is, and I think this is the relationship anarchist in me, is not getting precious around labels or getting
Mm,
precious around, talking about loving feelings, to
mm,
really allow
mhm,
that to just be part of the nature of relationships
mm,
and to allow that spaciousness for things to shift and change when they need to. Um,
mhm,
I think I do relationships in a very non-fixed way.
mhm, mhm. Yes, accepting the changing nature of things and expressing that in relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and
Mhm.
and I think that's queer. I think that's queer because it's, admitting that there is no, like, happily ever after.
Yeah,
Um,
it's absolutely queer.
okay.
Yeah.
This is me going, "Am I queer enough? Oh my gosh."
Okay, and so by what we've been talking about, by the description of queerness by Bell Hooks, which is going against the norms. Yes, absolutely, we are taught the narrative that relationships are only supposed to go one direction. They're supposed to, you don't get out alive. Really, that's essentially what we say about the only recognized form of relationship in our
Yeah,
society. And
yeah,
so accepting the natural changing nature of relationships is radical and also terrifying for the majority of people.
Well,
because we gain a sense of safety from this solidity and this feeling of security that comes with monogamy, and giving that up is really hard. So for any of our viewers who are feeling seen by this, it's okay if it scares you to
mhm,
think about relationships not lasting forever. It's really common, and it's something that I think a lot of people, I don't have there's no data on this, but I think a lot of people who are queering relationships, who are choosing relationships beyond monogamy, struggle with that same fear,
mhm.
because that fear is real, and because the the security that's offered by monogamy in our society is real.
Yeah.
And so giving that up is scary. And it's
I
okay
would
that that's scary. Yeah.
I would say that the security is real, but the stability is not.
Aha.
There's
Yes.
an
Yeah.
illusion that once you
Absolutely.
find your person, you are gonna be happy ever after, and of course,
Yeah.
that's not the truth, and, divorce rates are high, not everyone gets
Yeah.
married, like, we have this kind of dual experience of we have this mythology around monogamy that we're
Hmm.
given,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
reality doesn't match that. And that
Yeah.
is destabilizing because our nervous system, looks to find comfort in that mythology. That not only am I going to have the security that comes from, being partnered and all the government benefits and
Hmm.
accolades and social status and everything that comes from there,
Yeah.
but I imagine that's going to be till death do us part.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
not the
Hmm.
case, you know, or it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the case. And even
Yeah.
then, when is that spouse gonna die? Like, there's so
Yeah.
many different pieces that come into play. And I think that, questioning the mythology around monogamy is for some people the entry point,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
think for me, like, growing up as a teenager,
Hmm.
I had a sense of my queerness, but I didn't have the words to articulate it.
Hmm.
And I had a sense of my non-monogamy, and I didn't have the
Hmm.
words to articulate it. Um, but it was the questioning of my marriage that was the doorway for me to actually dive in and explore what all these things were for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm. That was your jumping off point.
That was the jumping
Hmm.
off point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And jumping off the relationship escalator. And so
Leaping,
I
parachuting off.
shooting off. I love that you brought in the mythology of monogamy. I think that that is so, so important. And yes, that's exactly what I was referencing, is this, the only state sanctioned relationship. It's really scary to
Mhm.
leave that as a
Mhm.
concept and give up on that as your ideal, or your guiding principle. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm. Lots in there.
So much in there. So
Mhm.
we're continuing to do these discussions every month, and we
Mhm.
have some thoughts about ways that we're going to switch it up as we start to. Can you believe we're going to be going into our second year of doing these discussions soon?
We are. I know. Yeah. How exciting is that? And I'm so pleased at how well attended they've been. Yeah, it's been really, really fun to see folks consistently come out, engaging in the
Mhm.
discussion. New
Mhm.
folks, folks who have been there almost every time, folks who are brand new to polyamory, folks who have been exploring it for a long time, all different styles of non-monogamy. It's really it's really wonderful to get together in a room and have a live discussion.
And we generally have, I think, between 20 to 30 people, like, quite
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah, quite
Um,
consistently.
and that makes for a really lively discussion.
Yeah,
And
it does.
and I'm looking forward to more. And I know that you won't be here for July.
No,
Uh,
no, in July, I'm gonna be presenting a workshop on non-monogamy at Base Coast Festival in BC, in Merritt, so I'm not gonna be here for one of the one-on-one discussions.
which is very, very exciting. I
I'm
love that you
excited,
are doing
yeah.
the music festival circuit
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that.
this is my second year presenting at that music festival, and it was like last year's workshop was amazing, so I'm really excited to iterate on it this year, so, yeah.
So And you get to do that during the week of non-monogamy visibility, which is
I
like
do.
amazing serendipitous timing.
Perfect
Um,
timing. Yeah.
and in Vancouver, there's going to be a whole week of different events for non-monogamy week of
Yes.
visibility. I'll be joined by Roxana Farnsworth, who's a wonderful counselor, who's going to be co-facilitating for the discussion in July. And we're going to be talking about when and how to come out. And then we've got some panels lined up for August and September, so that's going to be really interesting. Like, we're switching it up again, and
Hmm.
I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about the Vancouver Poly 101s, when I was just a participant in them and not a facilitator, is that it becomes a space for group learning.
Hmm.
We're all learning from each other. And I always look at it for me like I'm here and I'm facilitating and I've got questions and I'm helping to track like the order people are speaking in, but I'm learning as much as I give,
Hmm.
and that is so valuable,
Hmm.
to be in that
Hmm.
space of collaborative learning. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah. Yeah. So, how folks can find us through Facebook. We have a Vancouver Polyamory 101 Facebook group that you can join to get informed about the events. You can also reach out to myself or Mel to find out details about the events. And yeah, if you're in the Vancouver area, I hope you can join us. And yeah, we'll have more details on the panels and the different topics of the events as we get closer to each event.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm excited for the next few months and to keep growing this with you. It's such a
yeah,
delight.
likewise. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And thank you to everyone who's watching the recording. And we will see you next time.
See you all soon.
Bye.